Hey everybody, it's Marty, the JavaScript party, and my buddy Rhett here. She is behaving. I think she might have been misbehaving because she has a cage out in the living room, and that she spends the majority of her time in. And a few years ago, we realized, oh, you could probably like 15 years ago, you could give her a space, and then it kind of gave her she could go down in the bottom bin where generally all their waste is captured, whether from their food or their body or whatever. And she goes under there and she loves to burrow around, and she's laid eggs in there, and she likes to go down there and sleep and stuff like that. So, and then she'll climb out and spend the day. Well, my daughter-in-law and she brings her dogs over on a daily basis, and they like to get in. They bark at her, and she pecks at them, and they have a thing, but they have the cage in between them, so they can't really hurt her. I don't think she could actually hurt them because she's just so much smaller. But they have they spend a good 15, 20 minutes doing that. Well, I guess when the dogs were barking at her, they had closed up, so she couldn't get into the bottom. And I think that's where she does most of her sleeping and all that. So I think that was what her problem was yesterday. And maybe that's why she has been actually lately. She had just been so over the top misbehaving. Is I don't think she'd get to the place that she likes to go to sleep and relax, and where she feels really really safe. So that's that. I think because she seems to be a different bird today. And then when I was carrying her over here, she was a little unstable, so I think she might have been not feeling well as well. So she was not ready to do the show. So it is 8:01 in Marietta, Georgia, on the 13th, Thursday. I believe it's a Thursday. I am still gainfully employed. Actually, yesterday I felt very like it was a close call. I think my bosses are in a tough situation because I am I really would rather do something else with my life than be a professional software developer, and I've expressed that to them. And what I think I would really, well, so when I first came out of college, I got a job for Boeing, and I was a systems engineer because I have a degree in electrical engineering, and so I worked as a systems engineer writing software requirements for 2 years. And it was very, very frustrating to me because like I would write requirements, and then developers would be like, yeah, that can't be done. And then we were working with this language called Ada at the time, and it was like on Amish computers, an embedded system, and I didn't really know that system at all, so I couldn't figure out for myself if something was possible or not. And so I had always wanted to. I always thought in my mind, okay, I'm going to spend like 10 years as a developer and then go back to being a systems engineer. And then I ended up becoming like a developer for 30 years. And yeah, well, in 9 months it'll be 30 years. So it was just kind of like never did circle back, and I do think it is time for me to circle back. I think developers are specialists. They focus on something, and they don't necessarily always understand the whole system, so they don't really like where I work right now. They when they bring in a BA, they always bring them as a full timer, but when they bring in a developer, they always bring them in as contractors. They may eventually switch them over to a full timer, but for the most part, and I think that makes sense. I think it totally makes sense for a developer because I do think development is just like when you truly are a developer and you actually build solutions. Once that solution's built, there's really not as much work for you. So if they bring in 5 people and you guys build a solution out, and then once the solution's built, they still need their BAs, they still need their even their QAs. They need everything except for their developers. They don't need as many developers. So I do think it makes sense for me to go in that, but it's just like I can't even get a chance at one of those positions because of my development background. It's just kind of like, no, we'd rather you be a developer. So that's why I feel like, oh man, maybe I should go into a whole different thing, which I think is, since my son's an attorney, it seems like that paralegal job is sort of an equivalent sort of position as a developer, but over in law. And I would probably get an opportunity to start as a paralegal if I go and get a paralegal certificate. So that's kind of what I'm working towards. And, so it's hard for management to take my side on anything because, I'm not long for this industry. I'm trying to get out of this industry. Whereas, the person that I'm up against, this is what he wants to do, like, I don't know. I don't think he wants to be a developer, but I think he wants to stay in the industry. But anyways, so there's that. More to come tonight. We'll see. Tomorrow morning, I maybe have a bunch of time to work on this stuff. I might not. And then it made me think about it because one of the things me and this person have a lot of problems, but one of these problems is like kind of I think I'm more of a functional developer. Like I like things to be in functions, and I like them to be like narrative. So you see something and you go through steps and you can walk through the steps and it get done. And I think he likes things to be more like, I don't know what the word for it is, but like cascading style sheets is a language that like sort of acts on things that have been marked to do a certain way. I think he really likes that sort of development style. Like he feels like that's a more maintainable, better style, and I don't. But like I was trying to think through like how did I get here? And one of the things that I experience almost on a like especially when I first started a new job, but anytime is people always say, "Man, like your code is so readable. Like I can just read it. It just makes sense. I don't understand how you do it." And I didn't know how I was doing it either. But I remember there was this language that I used to work in called Perl, and Perl was notorious because what could happen is you could write a bunch of code that does a ton of stuff, go to lunch, come back, and you just could not read that code anymore. Like it was so difficult to write code that was readable in the Perl language. The Perl language was insanely powerful. Like it was crazy what you could do with just a couple lines of code. But then trying to go back and figure out what the heck you just wrote was very, very difficult. And that's where I sort of learned. I remember spending a lot of time writing code in a way in which it was narrative. It was like a narrative. It was just like, first I do this, and then I do that, and then I do this, and then I do that. Like I remember spending hours and hours and hours just poring over my Perl code trying to make it where it was narrative based, not like this code does these 15 things, and then that code acts on 3 of those things that previous 15 things was, and then this code acts on 5 of those things that the 15 things do, but also one of the second thing lines of code. Like I worked really hard to get away from that. And I do think that a lot of people, when they read my code, they can understand what's going on, which I do think is a dual-edged sword because what happens is like a lot of times some people will do a PR and they'll push it and it'll go through because no one can understand what it does. It just seems good, but they can't really understand what it does. And then they look at mine and they can understand what it does. So then they have a lot of opinions and we can just get mired up and never ever be able to get the PR through. I am. When I worked at CNN, I believe Git at the time had like a 2 or maybe GitHub or whatever we were using had like you could put up to 2,000 comments on a pull request, and I had a pull request that ended up with having to have all the comments deleted 3 times. So we did like 6,000 comments and all that, and it was really like it was. I didn't, there were architects who were fighting for it, and there were architects who were fighting against it. There were people all around the world screaming at the top of their heads like this cannot happen. This is a travesty. And then there were people that were like, this has to happen. Our whole system's going to collapse if we don't do this, and blah 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 blah. And it ended up. I'm glad I saw it through. There was like at least 100 times where I was just like, I just freaking want to quit. I don't want to deal with this stuff anymore. But what it was so nice because there was 2 events that happened that made me feel like probably that was the peak of my career. The next day when we pushed my code out, literally we had this giant map and it was the world and it showed all the people who were using it. And my entire career that I ever been there, that map, Africa was just black. Like nobody in Africa used CNN at the time. They just nobody. And then all of a sudden, it was lit up. My PR that had like 6,000 comments had people people at the VP level were threatened to quit if this didn't go out. Like this contentious, crazy PR that finally made it through lit up Africa. And the reason was, and something we just didn't realize, is that in Africa, the most popular browser was Opera Mini. And Opera Mini, what it would do, the feature that made it so popular in Africa is it would cache things, and if it was in the cache, they didn't have to pay for that data. But if it wasn't in the cache, they did have to pay for the data. And my understanding, I don't know this for sure, but I was told that that Africans had the option of seeing how much they'd have to pay to get that data. And once they paid that, then other Africans wouldn't have to pay to get that data. So it would do this analysis of how much the whole thing was going to cost. And so one African person could be like, oh, okay, I'm going to pay for this. And then every other person who tried to look at that same thing afterwards would get it for free. Well, because of this Webpack implementation that I did, Opera Mini was able to cache a lot more stuff. And since Opera Mini was able to cache more stuff, we got a lot more views in Africa, and literally overnight. So I lit up a continent with my code, which was pretty cool. And then, so that was like, actually just like a just absolutely amazing thing. And yeah, but you know, it was very contentious, and it was contentious because of the PR system, you know, because people had like ideas of how things should be, and they wanted, they didn't want, they, so what they didn't like was the fact that we didn't implement modules. They wanted web modules to be implemented as part of Webpack. But what we implemented was lazy loading. So you only loaded what you wanted, what you needed, and all that. So we used a Webpack feature, but we didn't use a Webpack feature to create web modules. And like we did try to create web modules, but the video, which was like 2/3 of our income, of the money that the organization made, was on video ads, and videos wouldn't work on Webpack. And like, I mean, with the modules, because the video code was so, the way it was set up, you just couldn't modularize it. You know, it's gonna have to be redone. And a lot of these developers thought that we had enough pull to like literally not have video, even though it was almost all of our income. So it was kind of a crazy disconnect between different people. But yeah, so that was an incredible experience that I had. And then I can't remember the second thing I wanted to talk about, but that, you know, I guess that's that. It'll be funny when I love to watch these videos, and then it cracks me up because I'll be like, oh, there's two things I need to talk about, and then I'll talk about the first one, and then the second one I just forget completely. But now in this code that we're working on, oh, I did want to mention that. So in my all these years that I've been playing around with ThreeJS and all that, I've actually only seen 2 job openings for ThreeJS. One was Airbus in Atlanta. They were trying to create like a startup business that was going to use drones to fly all around Atlanta and take pictures of the ground. And then they wanted some ThreeJS that would take pictures of things. And like one of the things that like as part of the interview process, one of the things that they did, use cases that they used was like they would sell the data to pool cleaners, and they would just tell everybody like, oh, see, these people have a dirty pool, people have it, so that people would be able to see, so that, you know, people who do pool cleaning for a living, they could pay some money, get a list of and see pictures of all these pools, and then be able to reach out directly to those people to try to sell their services. Seemed like a good idea. That I don't believe they ever filled that role. I think they shut the startup down before the role ever got filled. And then the other one was yesterday, and that was a recruiter reached out, and she was talking about like a position where like it's a medical kind of thing, and they make prosthetics. I'm trying to be vague here because who knows? Like I don't want to screw anything up for anybody. But they make these prosthetics and they do some sort of scan, and when they do the scan, they wanted to be able to create like a web VR sort of interface where, or augmented reality type of interface where you could see what they were going to build or whatever, so something along those lines. So they would need somebody 3D. And it's the first time I've ever seen a job thing where they said you have to know geometry and algebra, which, I love geometry and algebra. And actually, one thing I would love to do is become a calculus teacher. I just think calculus is just such a cool and interesting thing. If I'd had my druthers and I could become anything and money wasn't an issue, because I was a single dad when I graduated college. Money hadn't been an issue. I probably would have either gone into economics or math. I would be but I went into engineering because engineering, paid. So, but yeah, it would have been cool to do that. So it sounds like that would be a pretty cool job. That not I'm not really looking to be a developer anywhere though, so I didn't. So I just said no, thank you. But the but I do think that like 3D and all that. This is an example where like technology is way ahead of society. Like we just haven't figured out all the different uses of 3G and 3D, and on top of that, I don't think we're coming at it the right way. Like I always imagine like something that would be very, very useful to promoting the concept of 3D, like like Meta coming out and saying, hey, you can come in and live your Meta life and all that. Like I think everybody was just like, yeah, I already get too much like non-life, like that's not. I want to use this to enhance my real life, not step away from my real life. And I don't think the powers that be understand that. But what I do think would be like something that somebody might see that might encourage people to start wanting more 3D stuff is like, let's say you're watching an NFL football game, and so there's something happening, and then the quarterback steps off, and then you see him put like a 3D sort of visual thing, like hold it up to his eyes so he can see in 3D everything that was going on, and then he puts it down, and then he goes out and he has a better grasp of what's happening because he has 3D. Or you have linemen and they're like, okay, what the heck just happened to me here? And then they take on this 3D. Oh crap! Okay, so that guy went around that guy, and then see, I can't see that guy because that guy's in the way. Like these are things that you could do in 3D that people would then see other people doing, and then say, oh, I want to do that, or if there was like things where like really rich people who trade in commodities and stuff go, oh, let me put this on. Oh, okay, I have a better grasp of what's happening because I could see 3D visualizations of trades and things that are going on that I can't see in 2D. 2D just doesn't give me enough information. There's other layers of information that matter, and those other layers, like I could imagine, like you could have a 3D visualization where the trade, the wealth, how rich the person who's trading is shown by the size of the buildings in a 3D thing. So like you could sit over the top and you could see all these buildings all spread out all over the place, and the little ones are small investors and the big ones are big investors, and you could see what the big investors are investing in versus the little investors, and stuff like that. Like I feel like there's a lot of like 2D information. You can put a lot in there. They have the volume and all that stuff, but it just hits certain limits where there's just not enough things to look at in order to give you the data that you want. Whereas 3D, you could put a lot more, but like and all of those sort of enhance your real life as opposed to sort of pull you out of real life. And I think that's what would make things like 3JS and all that more. But 3JS and all those things are very capable of building all those things. They're just not, none of those ideas and implementations have been done yet. But anyway, so I am trying to integrate this, and I thought that I had all the pieces from end to end working, and so what I was expecting to see right now is this thing get rendered up here with, see, I have this canvas up here, and I thought it would be rendered with something like this with the 3D rendering, but just not animated because I knew I hadn't done animations. But for some reason, it's not rendering. So what's the time right now? 8:19. Okay, so I still have 41 minutes before I have to log into work and figure out if I'm going to be receiving paychecks in 3 weeks. It's going to be interesting. I am feeling a lot of anxiety about that, but you know, I don't know. I don't know what to think about all that. I'm definitely spending a lot of time thinking about it, but I don't know exactly where to go with it. So, but basically what's happening is my renderer is in fact, and I think I made some console logs yesterday. Oh no, that's interesting. I don't remember seeing this like this before. That's neat. Console. Yeah, so I have my renderer. It's an ST renderer service, and I have an object. And in my object, I do have meshes. So it seems like this ST renderer service is good. So it seems like the problem might be in my my ThreeJS renderer service. And the reason I know it's ThreeJS is because I don't have an ST here. And I keep going back and forth on whether it should have ThreeJS. And I think if I could use the number 3, I don't believe I can name it 3. I think that's a rule in JavaScript. It could just be 3, like the number 3 or something like that. I would probably do it. But I just don't want to have 3 render service. But maybe I should, because I think it is less confusing. All right, so let's go. So this is my render service. So it doesn't have a 3, it doesn't have an ST in front of it. So it is the 3 render service. And this is where rendering happens. And in my renderer, I get a scene. So my 3 scene, my actual 3 scene, I'm guessing doesn't have a, doesn't have the meshes in there. So let's do this. 3 scene. And then scene. And then we'll run this and we will inspect. And we'll go to the console log. And we will go to our, I think it's meshes, but I can't remember exactly. So this is the 3. This is the API that 3 has set up. So I don't see anything about meshes in here. Maybe they don't show up unless you actually have one. So, but I'm thinking that this scene, wherever this scene gets generated, is not adding the meshes. So now we're going to go to our 3 scene service, or ST scene service, and we're going to see where it calls create scene. So I hope that when I go to this 3 scene service, which I know it's 3 because it doesn't have the, and I go to create scene, that it doesn't do meshes. Because, well, oh, okay. So we created an add to mesh to scene function. So I'm guessing that was probably last time. So I'm guessing I don't call that. So let's go back. Okay, so basically here, this dot scene service dot add mesh to scene is equal to base mesh, and we'll definitely think dot. I thought base mesh had a mesh in it. Let's go look at this definition. I think it has a 3 mesh in it. Yeah, so I'll say 3 mesh. Hey, Rhett. Okay, so that is not working. And I think, oh, expected 2 arguments, but only got 1. Okay, so let's go back and look at this definition. So it wants an ID, but oh, okay. So it wants the scene ID, and then it's going to get its own scene. It's not going to use your scene. Your scene. Oh, and it's going to get a 3 scene. And I'm trying to pass the mesh in. Okay, I think that makes sense. So Alt left. Scene ID, comma. Then, I don't know. Okay, so it'd be interesting to see what its problem is. This is the, I spelled it right. Oh, it's bash mesh. I love you too, Rhett. Business. Okay, and now it's saying. Okay, so let's just double check that the base mesh. Okay, so let's just double check that this is what we want. Okay, it's a 3 mesh. And then let's go look at our, this guy. And that's a 3 mesh. Right, and they were identical. Let's see. So let's do this. Const mesh, which is a 3 dot mesh. Oh, I don't have 3 imported, so let's go ahead and import 3. Import star as 3 from 3. And that feels good, right? What I just did feels really good. And it only comes with practice. And I've just done it enough times where it's just practice. 3 mesh equals. Okay, so it is complaining that this 3 mesh is not, I think. Ooh, that is a pain. Mesh is declared, but its value is never read. Okay. So it's telling us that the mesh is not assignable to mesh. And I think it's, maybe it's, oh, because it could be undefined. So we're just going to say as 3 dot mesh. And then, so really what we should do is only do this if the mesh exists. But for now, I just want to do this and hit save and see what happens. Oh, kind of expected it to happen faster than that. Nope. Ugh. All right, so I really expected that to work. This scene service, add that scene, and then let's see. So I don't want to leave this like that. So I do want to add a little bit of safety around here before I move on, because it'd be very easy to get distracted and forget to come back here and take care of this. So I'm going to take care of this. If base mesh dot 3 mesh. So we're only going to do that if that. And so then I don't think we need this. And I think this is kind of alludes to, like, normally I think most developers would sort of just do this. But to me, I feel like this line of code in my brain just does too much for one line of code. I like one line of code to have, like, equate to one sentence in human language. And I feel like now we've added a second, like and or whatever. But if we do this, I think we don't have, we can, this is like saying, having one sentence that describes like what we're talking about, and then another sentence, and then another sentence that talks about adding it. What? Yeah. So I like that. And then I think, let's see, console log. And then it's a, scene, and then comma, and then we want to get the this dot scene service dot get scene by ID, and we want to give it the scene ID. And then let's just say ST scene service, just because our console is getting a little bit crowded. And just kind of just make sure it just does what we think it does. ST scene service RC. So I can't figure out how you know if a scene ever got populated. So let's just come over here and just put a breakpoint right there and reload. Okay, so scene ID is 4. The mesh is a mesh. It has a material. It has a geometry. Let's look at our geometry. Now I'm just sort of, so I feel like our geometry is missing something. Like I feel like the width and the height should be in here. But our geometry doesn't seem to have any width or height. So I think that's the first issue. Is like maybe we do have a mesh in there, but the mesh doesn't have any. See, okay, so we have this up and we have this scale. And we have a rotation, but we don't seem to have, we have a position, but we don't seem to have a width or a height. So let's come back in here and say go back to create base mesh. And we never do set the width and height of that. Which is weird that width and height aren't required. And the reason they're not required is because not all. So let's go look at that. I think not all meshes have widths and heights. And I had learned in my last one that it's kind of nice to have that. And it doesn't look like ST mesh. So we don't even have a width and height here. So I'm guessing that in the app version, we have that hard-coded, would be my guess. So sort of just as a proof of concept earlier, we had gotten it to build out and we were trying to work backwards. I was trying to work backwards to get this working. ST meshes, yeah. So we have, oh no, yeah, because the width and height is in the geometry. So when we create our geometry, we should have a width and a height, and not in. All right, now I'm confused. Let's see. So we have a mesh. Oh, I guess we need to reload. So we have a mesh, and it needs to have a geometry. I don't even see a geometry on our mesh. Oh no, there's our geometry. Yeah, see, our geometry, I guess, doesn't have a width and a height on it. So now let's go where we create our base geometry. And that feels good, that I can know exactly where that gray space. So I do have the width in the, when I create this thing. And then when I go to create my geometry from my non-ST version, so that's my 3 version. So all I do is create a box geometry. And I think I was thinking that when you created a box geometry, it would automatically return like a 1. And it does says that it defaults to 1. Oh, wrong one. So let's go back to our console. So we do our create our base mesh here, which I believe that's where the geometry ends up getting created. All right, so we're creating our base mesh. So fortunately, I think this is the second one. This is actually the one. Looks like we call this multiple times. So now I want to step into this. We generate the ID. Now geometry says create base geometry. So I think if we, and this is one reason for debug purposes, I do kind of like having these on different lines up there, because it's just a little easier to debug. We're in create base geometry. And here's where we create our actual geometry. It actually surprises me that we're this high on IDs now, but I guess that does make sense. Now, let's see, we'll step over this, and then I think we're going to have to, so this was number 12, yeah, so that's this guy here. So this guy, I don't see anything. It looks like it has a bunch of groups and stuff in it. But let's look at number 6, because I think number 6 is the one that is actually good. And it doesn't have, oh yeah, parameters, width, height, and depth. And it is funny that they're all 1. Oh, what a pain. Now let's look at number 12. And I guess we can look over here too. Make this a little bigger. Yeah, that's a bit of a pain. All right, so does number 12 have parameters? Well, it does. It has parameters too. Width, height, and depth of 1. And then I guess what happens in the app is then we go back and set them. Right, so like over here we set the width and height. as part of the app components. So when we create our geometry, new geometry, wherever we do this, see, we pass in this thing 0.75, 0.5, and 3. All right, so I guess just as a proof, I kind of hate to do this because, well, okay, so when I do this, create geometry. Oh, I wonder if that's our camera position. It could be, and I've done this a million times, that's the only reason I remember, it could be that when we create our camera, we are creating it as 0, 0, 0. STZ is 7, but then I wonder when we actually create a camera. Looks like, did I do that? This might be a mistake. Doesn't look like we actually create a camera. Get camera by ID. Let me hit Alt and left. 3 camera. Get camera by ID. Where do we? Oh, okay. There we go. Generate sequence. Oh, camera service. Create camera. Aspect near and far. Okay, so we never do set the position of the camera. So my suspicion is what's happening is the camera is sitting at 0, 0, 0, which is the same spot that the which is the same spot that the box is in, and then I think we are using a single-sided material. Material, yeah. So it only shows the inside, not the outside. So let's just test that theory really quick. Create geometry. Is it? No, it's material. That's our ST. Let's see. Create material. And we say get mesh normal material. And so we don't set so the default, I believe, on this is single. And I cannot remember how you set the double. I don't know if we do this. Okay, so I thought that was going to be a super quick thing, but obviously it's not going to be a super quick thing. We've gone into another rabbit hole. So let's just go ahead and put a comment here for tomorrow. Console.log. Set the position of the camera. And this is what they call domain knowledge, trying to, these are little things. I remember years ago, I was working at a place when I was at Boeing, there was a developer there was a contract developer that was from this organization called SAIC, and we were in a situation where we had a big desktop computer, and there was a floppy disk that was stuck on it, and the floppy disk itself was like confidential and could not be left out. But we couldn't figure out how to get the floppy out of it. It was stuck in there. So there was like this safe, and it was a real pain in the butt because, see, the safe had like a little slider thing where you could just go and just drop something in it so that floppy disk would be safe. But we couldn't drop the whole computer in, and the whole computer needed to go in the safe. So we would have to go get the security guard, and he would have to open it up and let us put the whole computer in. and then the next day we'd have to pull the whole computer out. And this SAIC thing, he'd been around for like I was probably like 24, 25 years old, and he was like 40 or something. So he'd been around for a while, and he was just like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we can't get this floppy out of here." And so then he just got a little paper clip and pushed it in, and it popped the floppy right out, and it just saved us literally an hour a day because we weren't going to have to wait. And it was just like some little thing that he knew, that just because he had been around, and those little things really add up. And like understanding the camera, such, that, hey, you got to make sure you get a camera, especially if it's going to be single sided and all that other stuff. Those are all like little little tidbits that you learn that then make you extremely effective. Unfortunately, people, your coworkers and leadership and all that, won't see the value in all that, but it does make your life better. And having a better life is, better than having a worse life. Anyways, everybody, have a good day. Happy coding. Bye.